In the quiet and beautiful village of Zuera, there lived a kind-hearted man named Bakosi. He was not only a skilled hunter, but also a talented craftsman who was deeply respected by everyone in the village. People admired his wisdom, his honesty, and his humble way of living. His family was his greatest pride, his gentle wife, Tajira, and their young daughter, Esena, who was just 16. Esena was full of life, always smiling, and loved by everyone for her soft voice, kind heart, and innocence that shone like sunlight. Their home was always warm with love and laughter. Bakosi would return from the forest with meat and stories, while Tajira cooked with joy, and Esena helped her mother with chores, laughing freely like the wind. But one day, everything changed, a day that would turn their world upside down forever. Bakosi left early in the morning for a hunting trip, like he had done many times before, but this time he never returned. The village waited, hoping he would come back with his usual smile, but instead, a search party returned with heartbreaking news. Bakosi had been found dead deep in the forest. Some said it was wild animals that attacked him. Others whispered in fear that something darker had happened, that maybe it wasn't just an accident, but no one could prove anything. All that remained was silence and sorrow. Tajira's cries filled the air for days. Esena sat by the fire, holding her father's hunting cloth, refusing to believe he was gone. Their home, once filled with laughter, was now heavy with pain and emptiness. Life became difficult. Bakosi had been the only provider. Without him, Tajira struggled to feed herself and her daughter. The village elders, seeing her pain and loneliness, began to whisper suggestions. "You are still young, Tajira. You cannot live alone like this. You need a man by your side." Even some women pressured her, saying it was unsafe for a widow with a young daughter to live without a husband in such times. At first, Tajira resisted. She clung to her memories, to her love for Bakosi. But with each passing day, the burden grew heavier. The food ran low, the roof leaked when it rained, and her spirit weakened. Esena tried to help, doing small chores and fetching firewood, but she was still a child. Tajira began to feel cornered, helpless, lonely, and desperate. And that's when the seeds of change began to grow, a change that would bring not comfort, but danger into their lives. The doors of their peaceful home, once guarded by Bakosi's strength, were now open to the unknown. What Tajira didn't know was that in trying to find stability again, she would unknowingly open the door to a man whose shadow would bring darkness into her daughter's life. A storm was coming, one that would test the strength of a mother, the courage of a daughter, and the justice of the land. But for now, the story was only beginning. 6 months had passed since the tragic death of Bakosi, and the pain in Tajira's eyes still had not faded. Life had grown colder and harder. The once warm home now felt hollow, and the smiles that once danced on Esena's face had slowly disappeared. The weight of loneliness wrapped itself tightly around Tajira's heart, and though she tried to stay strong for her daughter, it was clear she was growing weary. Then, one day, a stranger walked into Zuera village, a man who would change everything. He introduced himself as Kolajo, a traveling merchant who said he was looking to settle down and start a peaceful life in the village. He spoke gently, dressed modestly, and carried a worn-out bag that made him appear humble. He claimed to be a spiritual man who had seen many things in life and was now seeking a quiet place to rest and rebuild. His words were carefully chosen, his tone soft and respectful, and he smiled often, a smile that many believed showed kindness, but one that made Esena feel strangely uneasy. Kolajo didn't waste time winning the hearts of the villagers. He started helping around, fixing broken fences, fetching water for the elderly, offering herbs and little gifts to the children. People began to speak highly of him. Such a good man, they said, so respectful, so God-fearing. He didn't ask for anything in return, just a place to belong. And slowly, he began to spend more time around Tajira's house. He helped her fix the leaking roof, brought firewood when she was tired, and often came by with small food items saying, "I saw this and thought you could use it." Tajira, broken by months of sorrow and feeling the burden of being alone, began to feel comforted by Kolajo's presence. She had resisted the idea of remarriage for so long, but Kolajo's actions were gentle and consistent. The villagers encouraged it. "You need someone to support you," they said. "Kolajo is a good man." The pressure grew, and the loneliness within her deepened. So when Kolajo finally asked for her hand in marriage, Tajira, though hesitant, agreed. She thought maybe fate was giving her another chance at happiness. But while everyone else saw Kolajo as a savior, Esena felt something different. She noticed how his eyes followed her when he thought no one was watching. His gaze wasn't like a father's. It lingered too long, too low, too wrong. When he smiled at her, it didn't feel warm. It felt heavy, as if it carried secrets she couldn't understand, but feared deeply. Sometimes he stood too close, his presence uncomfortable, his eyes unsettling. Esena tried to brush the feelings off at first, thinking maybe she was imagining things, or perhaps she was just struggling to accept another man in her father's place. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Every time Kolayo was near, a chill ran down her spine. Yet no one seemed to notice. The villagers praised him, her mother adored him, and she felt completely alone with the strange fear growing inside her. What no one knew was that the man who smiled so kindly, who helped so generously, was hiding something dark, a secret buried beneath his charm. A storm was slowly brewing, and its thunder was beginning to echo in the silent corners of Esena's heart. At first, everything seemed calm. Kolajo acted like the ideal husband. He helped Tajira in every way, brought food, fixed things around the house, and even joined village gatherings as a respectful man. People admired him even more. Tajira smiled more often now, feeling like life was slowly getting better. Esena, though still quiet, tried to accept this new life. She didn't want to worry her mother. She didn't want to seem ungrateful or disrespectful. But deep inside her, something didn't feel right. Kolajo's behavior began to shift quietly, not in front of others, but when no one was watching. It started with small things, a hand resting on her shoulder for too long, a hug that felt too close, a glance that stayed a moment longer than it should. Esena didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure if she was imagining it or if she was overthinking things. But every time Kolajo touched her, even in simple gestures, her heart raced, not with comfort, but with fear. One day, while she was in her room changing her clothes, Kolayo suddenly walked in without knocking. Esena screamed and quickly covered herself. Kolayo didn't look surprised. Instead, he stood there for a few seconds, then said casually, "Oh, I thought you weren't inside," before walking out slowly, not even apologizing. Her hands trembled as she held her wrapper close. She stood there frozen, feeling exposed, confused, and afraid. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying the moment, over and over. After that day, Esena began to feel like she was no longer safe in her own home. She tried to stay away from Kolajo, but the house was small, too small to escape his presence. He always found reasons to be near her. If she was sweeping the floor, he would suddenly come to help. If she went to the backyard, he would appear there too, asking strange questions or watching her in silence. Sometimes he would ask her to sit beside him, calling it family bonding. But Esena felt every second like she was walking on sharp stones. She wanted to tell her mother, but every time she looked at Tajira's smiling face, her heart broke. Her mother looked happy again for the first time in months. She didn't want to ruin that. She didn't want her mother to think she was lying or trying to destroy the marriage. So she kept it all inside, her fear, her discomfort, her confusion. But the shadows behind Kolayo's smile were growing darker, and Esena could feel it more each day. The man everyone praised outside was slowly becoming a nightmare behind closed doors, and Esena was trapped, not just by walls but by silence, fear, and the fear of not being believed. She kept hoping it would stop, that maybe she was just overthinking. But deep in her heart, she knew something was very wrong. Something evil was hiding behind Kolayo's gentle face, and she was the only one who could see it. Esena could no longer hold the fear inside her. Each day, Kolajo's strange behavior made her feel more unsafe. His eyes always followed her, his touches felt wrong, and his presence haunted every corner of the house. Her heart was heavy, and her spirit slowly breaking. She tried to be strong, but the silence was eating her alive. One evening, when her mother was sitting alone in the kitchen, peeling cassava, Esena took a deep breath and walked up to her. "Mama," she said softly, her voice shaking. "Can I talk to you, please?" Tajira looked up and smiled gently. "Of course, my child. What is it?" Esena hesitated for a moment, then gathered all the courage in her heart. "It's about Kolajo. He does things that make me feel uncomfortable." Tajira's smile slowly faded. "What do you mean?" Esena lowered her eyes. "Sometimes he looks at me in a strange way. He touches me in ways that don't feel right. He walked in on me while I was changing, and he didn't even apologize. There was silence. Tajira stared at her daughter in disbelief. Then, her expression hardened. Esena, what kind of talk is this? She asked sharply. That man has done nothing but take care of us. He puts food on this table. He helps me with everything. And this is what you say about him. Mama, I'm not lying, Esena said, her eyes full of tears. Please believe me. I don't feel safe around him. But Tajira shook her head in anger. No, don't ever speak badly about the man who feeds us. You should be grateful. Do you know how hard it is for a woman alone in this village? Just then, Colaggio entered the room, as if he had been waiting to hear this. He acted surprised and confused. What's going on here? He asked, pretending not to know. Tajira turned to him and said, She's accusing you, saying you touch her wrongly. Colaggio gasped, then fell to his knees dramatically. What? He cried. Me? I treat her like my own daughter. I would never hurt her. Why is she saying this about me? What have I done to deserve this? He began to weep, covering his face with his hands. I've only tried to help this family. I've only shown love. Tajira rushed to his side and held his shoulder. No, don't cry. She's just confused. Maybe she doesn't understand your kindness. Esena watched in disbelief. Her mother was comforting the very man who made her feel unsafe. Her heart sank. Tajira turned back to her daughter, her eyes cold now. This is the last time I want to hear such talk. If you ever say something like this again, I'll think you're trying to break this home. Esena stood there frozen. Her words had fallen on deaf ears. Her truth had been crushed beneath Colaggio's lies and her mother's blind love. She had reached out for help and was left more alone than ever. Now, not only was she trapped in fear, but in silence too. Days turned darker in the house that once held warmth. Colaggio no longer pretended. He had become bold, wicked, and frightening. Whenever Tajira stepped out of the house, whether to the market or to the neighbor's compound, he would find a way to get close to Esena. His footsteps echoed like a warning, but still, he moved silently, always creeping up behind her. He started touching her without shame, brushing against her arm, her back, even her waist, and always with that sickening smirk on his face. He whispered dirty things in her ears, words that made her want to disappear. You're growing into a beautiful woman, he would say, voice low and twisted, too beautiful to ignore. Esena would freeze each time, her hands shaking, her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, but fear tied her lips. The house had become a prison, and Colaggio was the monster hiding in every shadow. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Tajira had gone to help a neighbor with some firewood, and Esena was left at home. She was in the kitchen, cutting vegetables, trying to keep her mind off the fear when Colaggio walked in. She tried to leave, but he blocked the doorway. Where are you going? He asked with a chilling smile. Why do you always run from me? I need to go outside, she said, avoiding his eyes. But he stepped closer and placed his hand on her waist, slowly pulling her toward him. Stop it! Esena cried, pushing him hard. The knife she was holding fell to the floor with a loud clang. She ran out of the kitchen, her heart pounding like a drum. She didn't stop until she reached the backyard, gasping for air, tears flooding her eyes. But before she could gather herself, Colaggio followed her outside. His voice turned cold, dangerous. If you tell anyone, I will tell them you seduced me, he hissed. You think anyone will believe you. Your own mother doesn't even trust you. You're just a child. I'm the respected man in this house. Esena stood there shaking, feeling like the world had collapsed under her feet. His threat echoed in her mind over and over again. What if he was right? What if no one believed her? What if he twisted the truth and made her look like the guilty one? That night, she didn't eat, she didn't speak, she didn't even cry anymore. Something inside her had cracked. Her eyes lost their shine. Her smile disappeared completely. The once cheerful girl who laughed while fetching water or sang while sweeping the floor was now just a shadow. Her school performance started to fall. The teachers noticed her silence, her tired eyes, but no one knew the storm she was carrying inside. Even her friends whispered behind her back, she's not the same as Esena anymore. But no one asked why. Colaggio had not only touched her body, he had touched her spirit and crushed it. And the most painful part was, the one person she thought would protect her, her own mother, was blind to it all. The house was full of silence, but that silence held the loudest screams. Late one night, with her heart drowning in pain and her voice buried under fear, Esena sat quietly by the flickering oil lamp in her room. Her hands trembled as she picked up a small piece of paper and began to write. With every word, her tears dropped onto the page. She poured her soul into that letter. Not just words, but cries no one had heard. She told everything, how Kalayo had touched her, whispered filthy things, and how her mother refused to believe her. Her only hope was her childhood friend, Jovia, the daughter of the local healer. The next morning, Esena slipped the folded letter into Jovia's basket when she came to fetch water from their compound. Jovia found it later, hidden beneath the calabash. As she read the painful words, her hands shook and her eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe what her friend had endured in silence. She ran straight to her grandmother, old Mama Chisomo, a woman respected across Zuera for her wisdom and fierce sense of justice. Mama Chisomo read the letter slowly, her face turning stern, her eyes burning with rage. "This cannot be hidden," she said firmly. "No child should suffer in silence while monsters walk freely." Without wasting a moment, Mama Chisomo took the letter to the village elders. The meeting drum echoed through Zuera, calling everyone to the council square. People gathered under the big baobab tree, whispering among themselves. The elders, dressed in traditional robes, listened carefully as Mama Chisomo read the letter aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. The air turned cold with tension. People gasped. Mothers clutched their daughters closer. But just as the truth began to stir hearts, Kalayo stood up confidently. He acted shocked and offended. "This is nothing but lies," he said, raising his voice. "She is a confused girl, trying to destroy my name. I am a man of honor. I have never touched her wrongly." Some villagers nodded, unsure whom to believe. Kalajo had always shown himself as helpful and kind. Could this really be true? Tajira stood there, her face pale, torn between what she had heard and what she wanted to believe. When the elders turned to her for answers, she hesitated. Then with tears in her eyes, she said, "Please, don't ruin my marriage. Maybe Esena misunderstood something. Kalajo has always taken care of us." Her words struck like a knife into Esena's soul. Even now her mother chose to protect her marriage instead of her daughter's truth. The village was divided. Some believed Esena, others doubted. But one thing was clear. Her voice had finally been heard beyond the walls of her home. The silence was broken, and even though justice hadn't come yet, the seed of truth had been planted. The winds of change had started to blow in Zuera, and they would not stop until the truth came fully to light. It was a quiet evening, and the sun had just slipped behind the hills of Zuera. The village was calm, the air still, and only the distant sounds of crickets filled the silence. Tajira had gone to the river to fetch water, leaving Esena alone in the house. Inside, Esena sat nervously, her heart pounding. She had felt it in her bones. Something dark was coming. Kalayo had been unusually quiet all day, watching her with that same sickening look in his eyes. Then, it happened. Kalayo entered the room slowly, closing the wooden door behind him. His voice was low and heavy. "No one is here to protect you now." His steps drew closer as Esena backed away, her hands trembling. Please stop," she cried. But Kalajo reached for her. Fear swallowed her voice. He tried to grab her arm, his intentions dark and evil. Esena screamed, but in her heart, she feared no one would hear. But fate had other plans. Just then, the door burst open. Jovia stood there breathless, followed by Mama Chisomo and two elderly women from the village council. Jovia had felt something was wrong all day, an uneasy feeling she couldn't shake, so she had gone to Mama Chisomo, and together they rushed to Esena's home, and now, there it was, truth standing in front of their eyes. Kalajo froze, his hand still mid-air. Mama Chisomo's eyes widened in fury. "You beast!" she shouted. The two elder women stepped in, grabbing Kalayo, holding him back as Esena collapsed in tears. The room echoed with shock and horror. The entire village gathered quickly as the news spread like wildfire. People came running from every corner, whispering and gasping as they saw Kalajo being dragged out of the house like a criminal. His mask of kindness and fake holiness had been torn off in one instant. Tajira arrived minutes later, a water pot still balanced on her head. But as she saw the crowd, the panic in her eyes grew. "What is happening?" she cried, pushing her way through. When she saw Esena sobbing on the ground and Kalajo held by the elders, everything became clear. Her knees gave way. The pot crashed beside her. She fell to the ground, wailing. "Esena, my daughter, what have I done?" She crawled to her daughter, holding her tightly. "Forgive me. Please forgive me. I didn't listen. I didn't protect you. I failed you." Her cries shook the hearts of those watching. Now no one could doubt the truth. Kalayo's evil was exposed. The villagers looked on with rage and regret. The same man they had once praised now stood disgraced and broken. Whispers of punishment and banishment filled the air. Esena, though shattered, had finally been heard. And in that moment, under the moonlit sky of Zuera, justice had begun its slow but powerful journey. The sun rose with a strange heaviness over Zuera the next morning. The village was silent, yet everyone's heart was loud with anger and sorrow. The council of elders gathered under the sacred baobab tree, the place where truth was weighed and justice was delivered. The villagers circled around, eyes fixed on Kalayo, who now sat in the center, his face no longer proud, his eyes filled with fear. The trial began. One by one, people stood to speak. Jovia spoke first, her voice firm as she recalled the night she walked into the house and saw Kalayo's evil exposed. Mama Chisomo spoke next, reminding the elders of the cries of a broken girl and the silence of a mother's guilt. Then, the healer stood up. She gently confirmed the bruises found on Esena's body, marks of pain no child should carry. Then came the most shocking revelation. One of the oldest elders, who had traveled far in his youth, suddenly stood and said, "I know this man. His face has changed, but his eyes haven't. He was once called Kondo. He was banished from the village of Utalo for abusing a young girl. He ran and changed his name to Kolajo." A gasp spread through the crowd like wildfire. So this monster had done this before. This wasn't a mistake. It was his nature. The rage in the villagers' hearts now turned to flames. There was no more room for doubt, no more space for forgiveness. The head of the council rose and gave the final verdict in a thundering voice. "Kolajo, for the evil you have done, for breaking the trust of this village, and for scarring the soul of a child, you are hereby exiled to the forest of wailing spirits. May the spirits of the cursed forest take from you what you took from others. Peace." The villagers erupted in fury. Kolajo was dragged from the center. He tried to beg, but no one listened. Some women threw ashes at him. Children picked stones and hurled them with tears in their eyes. Men spat on him, calling him a coward, a devil in disguise. He was stripped of his fine clothes, beaten with sticks, and paraded through the village like a beast. The path to the forest of wailing spirits was rough and filled with thorns. The crowd followed as Kalayo was forced to walk barefoot, his feet bleeding with every step. No one showed mercy. The closer they got to the forest, the colder the air became. The trees grew darker, whispering stories of other evil men who had vanished inside, never to return. At the edge of the forest, the elders stopped. Kolajo was pushed forward. His screams echoed, but no one turned back. He disappeared between the trees, swallowed by the same darkness he once hid behind. The village stood there silently for a moment, watching the cursed forest take him. It was over. Justice had spoken. The wicked had been punished. And though the scars on Esena's heart would take time to heal, the nightmare had finally ended. The evil had been dragged away. Just as the spirits had promised, Zuera was once again safe. Days passed after Kolajo's exile, but the wounds he left behind still lingered in the hearts of Tajira and Esena. Though the monster was gone, the pain he planted remained. Esena barely spoke at first. She often sat silently under the mango tree, her eyes distant, her heart heavy with memories she wished she could erase. But Mama Chisomo did not leave her side. With her gentle voice, soothing herbs, and the wisdom of old traditions, she began to help Esena heal, slowly, gently, day by day. Mama Chisomo's home became Esena's safe space. There she was encouraged to write, speak and cry without shame. One day, after many weeks of silence, Esena finally whispered, "It wasn't my fault." Those words marked the beginning of her healing journey. Her spirit, once crushed under fear, slowly started to rise again. The brightness that had once lived in her eyes began to return, like a candle being lit again after a storm. With time, Esena found her strength in her voice. She stood before a small gathering of girls in the village and told her story, not with shame, but with courage. Her words were like fire to some, water to others. Some cried, others clenched their fists in rage, but all listened. It was the first time someone had spoken openly about such pain, and it changed something in the village. Soon, girls from neighboring villages came to hear her. Mothers brought their daughters. Elders invited her to speak. What began as one girl's voice turned into a movement. Esena named it Daughters of Light, a safe space for young girls to speak, heal, and find their power again. They held circles under the moonlight, shared stories, sang healing songs, and supported one another. No girl would be left alone in silence again. Even Tajira, burdened with the weight of her own guilt, stepped forward. She could never erase what had happened, but she refused to remain in regret. She joined her daughter's movement, standing beside her, speaking to other mothers. "Listen to your daughters," she would say, tears in her eyes. "Don't let your love for a man blind you from the truth your child is trying to speak." Together, Esena and Tajira became a force of change. They traveled across villages, spreading awareness, helping families understand the signs of abuse, and creating safe spaces for victims. Slowly, the stigma around speaking out began to fade. More girls came forward, more mothers listened, and more communities opened their eyes. What once began as tragedy became a ripple of transformation. Esena, once broken and afraid, was now seen as a light, a protector, and a warrior. Her voice carried power, her story became a torch, and her pain turned into purpose. The wound had not disappeared, but it had healed enough to become a weapon for change. And so, Zuera became more than just a village. It became the heart of a movement that would echo for generations, a place where daughters were no longer silenced, where mothers stood guard, and where healing bloomed from the deepest scars. In the heart of the dreaded forest of wailing spirits, Colajo's torment truly began. The same man who once walked proudly through Zuera, deceiving everyone with his false kindness, now crawled in mud and darkness. The forest, thick with cursed winds and eerie cries, became his prison. No walls, no chains, just endless suffering delivered by nature itself. The same animals he once boasted of hunting now hunted him. Snakes slithered near his feet. Thorned bushes tore his skin. His eyes, once filled with lust and lies, began to rot with infection, and soon he lost his sight completely. Day turned into night, and Colajo had no food, no water, no fire. He limped through thick bushes with blistered feet, calling out for help, but no one came. The spirits of the forest, angry and unforgiving, seemed to echo the cries of the girls he once tried to silence. Every branch that scratched his skin, every ant that bit his flesh, every howl in the night, it all felt like the voice of karma singing its punishment. He survived by crawling near the edge of the forest, begging from passing travelers who sometimes came through the nearby trade route. But even they, upon seeing his pitiful form, turned away. Some cursed him, some spit on him, others simply threw stones and passed by. The once clever liar was now reduced to a shadow of a man, living in filth, eating leaves, and shivering in the cold. One evening, a traveler from a distant village heard Colajo's groans beneath a dying tree. Curious, the traveler stepped closer and asked, "Old man, what happened to you? Who did this to you?" Colajo, weeping like a child, whispered with trembling lips, "I touched what was sacred, and now the spirits curse me forever." His voice was weak, his face full of regret, but it was too late. The pain he caused had come back to him, multiplied. No mercy remained in the forest. He had no friends, no home, no name, just a broken body and a cursed soul, slowly fading away in the same darkness he once forced on others. And as the screen fades to black, a haunting voice speaks. When evil wears a father's face, it must be unmasked. Silence protects monsters, but truth sets daughters free. And when karma strikes, it leaves no shadow untouched. The final image shows Esena standing tall in front of a group of young girls, holding a lantern high in the night. Her face shines with courage, her spirit unshaken. Her light, once dimmed by pain, now guides others out of their own darkness. Because in the end, no matter how long the night is, the dawn always comes. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. There are countless Esenas out there, innocent souls suffering in silence, afraid to speak, afraid to be judged, afraid no one will believe them. But silence protects the abuser, and truth protects the innocent. Let this tale be more than just a story. Let it be a voice for every girl who feels alone, unheard, or unloved. Let it be a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light can rise, and that no evil, no matter how cleverly it hides behind a father's smile, will escape the hands of karma. If you believe in justice, if you believe in standing with the innocent, If you believe no child should suffer in silence, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, heart-touching African stories that speak truth and spark change. Together, we can be the voice for the voiceless. Together, we can bring light into someone's darkness. Thank you so much for watching. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in justice.